Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Urs Gasser. I'm the Executive Director of the Berkman Center for Internet and Society here at Harvard University in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I'm very sorry that I can't be with you today in Jakarta to congratulate you first and foremost on this very impressive report on digital citizenship and safety among children and young people in Indonesia. I would like to extend my congratulations to our colleague Professor Gatti in particular and her team. You have done a really wonderful job in producing a very insightful report. I would like to offer just a few comments, again with apologies that I cannot be in Jakarta in person today and engage more fully in the conversation. I would like to highlight a number of findings and just share a few reflections. The first point that captured my attention is the findings regarding the use of the internet among young people. I'm quite excited actually to read how much young people are using the internet to seek out for information, to use it as a tool for learning and education, and also to do schoolwork. So I think that's very important to keep in mind. And of course, as we know from other countries as well, the internet plays a really increasingly important role in maintaining friendships and building new friendships. And of course, entertainment matters for all young people around the world. But nonetheless, this emphasis on information seeking and the role of the internet as a tool for learning, I think that's a very important key finding I just wanted to highlight. A few comments on some of the risks that your report identified. I have two comments here. First, well, again, the report does a really good job in describing and framing some of the risky behaviors online, ranging from privacy issues to cyberbullying and the exposure to unwanted pornography. I think it's important to keep in mind that we as researchers face methodological limitations when asking particularly sensitive questions to young people. So one of the examples in the report is bullying. When we ask young people whether they've been the victim or experienced cyberbullying, we get a pretty high response rate, as in this report as well. But if we ask whether they have been bullies and have used the internet or digital technology to bully others, we rarely get an answer. So there is a discrepancy between the experience of as a victim and being what is reported as being an active bully. That's not new, and is of course quite understandable that we don't like to disclose bad behavior ourselves, but it's important to keep that in mind. Data from the US, but also from Europe, for instance, suggests that victims of bullying, of cyberbullying, are themselves quite often also aggressors, or themselves also bullies, so that there is significant overlap between the two categories. I mention that because these nuances are really important when we then think about ways how we can address certain risky behaviors or certain problems. So it's very important, although we have great progress in this report and a lot of data, that we even take a closer look at some of the issues before we draw conclusions with respect to potential approaches or solutions. The second comment I would like to make regarding risks is how important it is to differentiate between risks that we can observe and actual harm. we should be very careful not to mix the two categories. In fact, quite often we do not have a good understanding how risks online play out. What does it say in terms of actual harms or potential harms when teenagers, as it is described in the report, share their phone numbers or home address over social networking sites? It's a hard question. Yes, it includes a privacy risk, but what does it actually mean? How serious is the risk? And how likely is it that the young person will suffer any harm? Again, we have to acknowledge what we can state as researchers. There are limits to the findings. We can only say so much. Another example in the same category is the exposure to unwanted pornography. The numbers may be high, but let's also be aware that the exposure itself says relatively little about the actual impact that the exposure has. So here again, I see the need for more research before we draw conclusions on this description of the risk landscape. Moving from risks to the solution space, and here again I have three brief comments. First, I very much agree with the findings of the report and the recommendations that education plays a very important role as we move from the analog and offline world to the digital online world. Education is key. The report points out how important, for instance, literacy programs are. The report also rightly describes peer learning approaches and the idea of an ambassadorial program as promising. I would explicitly support that position. I think it's important to think about education not only in terms of educating kids, but also educating parents, educating policymakers, and the public at large. So let's make sure we not only look at kids and their educational needs, but really try to inform the entire ecosystem. The second point concerns the role of the parents. In various places in the report, the role of the parents is highlighted, sometimes in a positive way, sometimes in a rather negative way. For instance, the lack of parental supervision has been flagged in this report several times. As far as the recommendations go, I would agree that it's very important to involve parents in the conversations with educators, with children when it comes to risk management, but also, let's not forget that, also when it comes to the learning opportunities and the opportunities for participation that this new technology brings. So the conversation with parents should not only be about risks, but also about the opportunities that their children have in front of them thanks to the internet. A footnote on the note on this issue of the role of parents. I would be careful using the terminology of supervision. Maybe this is a translation problem because I only had the English, I can only read the English version. We have quite some experience here in our part of the world that parents who closely monitor their children online may actually increase what we would describe as the privacy problem. So it's a fine line to draw. If parents get too close and look too closely at what our children are doing online, they actually run a real risk to violate the privacy of their children. So that's to keep in mind when we think about the role of parents. Perhaps it's helpful not to use the term supervision so much, but think about more collaborative conversations and more positive approaches. The final comment is with looking again at the solution space and the recommendations is the role of the government. I agree that the government plays a very important role across the issues flagged in the report. I would also again agree that educational policy may be the main area where the government can make a positive contribution. That's well acknowledged in the report, and I think very sound advice. I would add one thing that I didn't see so much in the recommendations, and again I understand this is only a short version of the report, so I thought I would just want to highlight that, and that's the role of the government to increase access to the internet, to the digital world, and help young people to get online and harness the huge opportunities that they have. The report shows, of course, given the specific geography of Indonesia, that there is a significant digital divide between rural areas and other areas across Indonesia. And here I see the government potentially playing a very important role in making sure that also less privileged parts of the country are connected to this increasingly global world. So these are a few reactions to a report that of course deserves much more thinking, reflection and discussion, but I hope that my few remarks are at least helpful in the context of your discussions today. Again, thank you for your wonderful work here. I'm delighted to see the outcome of our joint effort here. Congratulations again to the team, and hopefully until soon, either in Jakarta or here in Boston, where we hope to welcome Professor Gatti at our UNICEF Berkman Symposium on youth and digital media from a global perspective. Thank you.